Howdy, and welcome to episode 112 of In the Rabbit Holes Urban Survival Podcast. In this episode, Paul Wheaton joins us to light our fires and make our gardens grow. I'm your host, Aaron, and you are in the rabbit hole, safe and sound. Okay, very exciting guest today. We've got Paul Wheaton. Yes, the Paul Wheaton. And we have a ton of different things that we're going to talk about today. And starting with, Paul, welcome to In the Rabbit Hole.
Oh, thanks, Aaron, for having me. This will be cool.
Now, I got to say, I feel a little like we're cheating on Jack, because I know of you primarily or initially from Jack's show, the Survival Podcast. So I feel a little clandestine here from stealing you away for at least a day.
Well, I haven't been on Jack's show in a while. It seems like he has me on, I don't know, once a year or so. So, you know, there's all these other days in the year that I'm not on Jack's show.
Exactly. And so let's jump right in. You've had a big project recently that has been pretty successful and a really neat project all around rocket mass heaters. So I guess let's start with the basics for the people that don't know what that is. What is rocket mass heating?
This is a different way to burn fire, and I suppose that one quick way of describing it would be to say that those people who have wood stoves now, a primary concern that they have is about having a chimney fire. So the creosote builds up in your chimney, then catches on fire, and if you're unlucky enough, which is probably about half the time, it'll burn your house down. And then you get to stand outside in your pajamas. Here in Montana, it'd be while you're standing in the snow and watch your house burn down, thinking like, well, that was rather inconvenient. So the idea is that a rocket mass heater will try to create a chimney fire every time, and the technique that it uses is that usually when you have a conventional wood stove, you have the fire and you start sucking the heat off of the fire into the room right away. And what a rocket mass heater does is it says, oh no, we're not going to do that. We're going to try and instead see if we can make it hotter, 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 and hotter to the point that it gets so crazy, insane hot that it burns all the smoke and it burns all the creosote and it burns all of everything else. Then after it's like been this insanity hot, then we start to harvest the heat for the room. So that's kind of like the primary difference. Now, when you look at the contraption, and in fact, the first time somebody told me that this is how it works, I was sure that they were nuts, because they say, here's the thing: you got this hole that goes down. That's where you put the wood, and it's like, so then you cover the hole. No, you don't cover the hole. And I said, well, then when it burns, isn't all the smoke going to come into the room? No, it doesn't. Yeah, I don't believe you. And so, but what happens is the fire burns sideways. And then there's like a miniature chimney that's about 3 or 4 feet tall that's been built, and it's super insulated. And this is where we're going to make the fire freaky hot. And so then as it's getting hotter, 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 well, then you've got your thermosiphon going. And it starts to create the rockety sound that you hear during a chimney fire, the sound, and it's pulling up into the chimney super hard, which makes it so that the air where the wood is being pulled down between the sticks of wood. The fire burns sideways and it goes up. So it is a bizarre thing to see. There's the wood. It's not, you look down inside and the smoke's not coming up under your face. You watch the fire burn sideways. And you have to see it a few times before your brain can accept that that's what's really going on. Whoa, that's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
So the bottoms of the sticks burn, and then as the fire burns, the sticks kind of go down inside the fire, and then you put in more sticks. But the benefit is that people that switch from a conventional wood stove to a rocket mass heater. We've got several that have been reporting that they heat their homes with 1/10 the wood. So perk. We also hear people that are where it burns so clean that they're like in an urban environment where wood burning is not allowed, but they're totally getting away with it because since it burns so clean, it gets so hot. It's like instead of calling, there's not smoke that comes out. Well, I take that back. There's a little bit at the beginning because it hasn't gotten up to heat yet, and there's a little bit at the end because the system's cooled down. But in the middle of the burn, very clean. And so people are getting away with it because it just looks like exhaust coming out of a dryer vent. And
that's really cool. And it's amazing that it's actually that efficient. I know I saw some stuff a while back, and I know there's been a lot of recent improvements with it, a lot of which came from you. But it really is quite amazing how efficient it is. Now, I guess here's one of the kind of conundrums for somebody in a suburban and urban, which is retrofitting that technology into an existing home. How difficult actually is it? I mean, obviously it depends on the initial construction of the home, but in general, how difficult is this to retrofit into a home?
Oh boy. I mean, it depends. I mean, like, let's say you've already got an existing wood stove. It would be possible to shoot the exhaust out through the roof of where your existing wood stove is going out. The key is the weight of the mass. So rocket mass heater. So there's a mass involved. And so there's two primary components to the heater. One is where you get your instant radiant heat. And so the thing that heats up and you get a whole bunch of radiant heat. And then it's got an exhaust that goes through a mass and then it goes out. So then what happens is with anything that you're not using immediately, gets put into this mass, and so then the exhaust that goes out is much cooler than the smoke that would go out from a conventional wood stove. So now when your question is how do you go about doing this and how difficult is it and stuff like that, I would have to say that if you've got a cement foundation, then that's going to probably be able to hold the mass really well. If you don't, then you need to shore up that foundation, whatever it is, that floor. You need to shore up that floor extra thoroughly to be able to hold the mass. So now there are people that have done this, without a mass, and that's a whole different school of thought, and it doesn't seem to be nearly as efficient. But boy, and we've got some variations too. Now we're doing a lot of experimenting with what we call pebble style. And I believe that this is something that I invented. I haven't. If somebody else invented it, I haven't heard about it yet. But the pebble style is lighter than the more traditional style, which is going to be using they call it cob, but basically what it is dirt. But it's just the right kind of dirt. But anyway, the cob style, the mass behaves much better. But it is, of course, much heavier. And I think it's more effective in a lot of ways. But with the pebble style, we're still getting good results, just not as good. The pebble style is probably something that people can buy into better. Not only is it lighter, but it's something where the entire rocket mass heater can be taken apart and put onto a truck in an hour. And then, like, if supposing you're going to move, and then you get to a new location, and then you can take it off of the truck and rebuild it in about an hour. And maybe it'll be longer than an hour right now, but we're working on some things to make it well under an hour.
So now I'm going to reach out of my depth a little bit here for a second, because I had a little flirtation of interest with rocket mass about a year ago and started investigating it, and then wound up on some other tangents at the time. Does that fall more in line with vermiculite, or is vermiculite more in line with cob? Or am I talking about something totally different and don't know what the hell I'm talking about?
I'm going to go with you don't know what the hell you're talking about.
Perfect.
I'll take don't know what the hell you're talking about for $100, please, Alex. I mean, vermiculite is it looks like it's about the size of pea gravel, but it weighs practically nothing. And instead of using vermiculite, I tend to use perlite. So let me set vermiculite aside, and I'll say perlite.
Okay.
And perlite's going to be puffed rock. So it's heated to a certain temperature, and it pops like popcorn. and then it's got all these air pockets in it. And then we can use it's extremely lightweight. You've seen it probably in certain potting soils, little white things in potting soils. And we do sometimes use it. You don't have to use it, but sometimes use it in parts of the rocket mass heater where it's going to be the hottest. It's because of its ability to insulate, and it tolerates extremely high temperatures. But the pebbles are going to be like pea gravel, like what you'll see on some walkways or some parks or in some landscaping. And it's just these little pebbles that are kind of rounded. Pea gravel. So that's all the pea gravel is. But although we'll usually put some bigger rocks in with the pea gravel for the mass. So usually there's a part that we refer to as the core, and the core is going to have the wood feed, the burn tunnel, the heat riser, and the manifold. And so that's the core. And then there's the mass, and the mass is going to be, in this case, pebbles. Although again, cob is preferable. If you can do it. I mean, you would need to be able to hold the cob up. And then the other thing is cob's permanent. You're not, if you say, I'm going to move next week, then, that's staying. You're not taking that with you. That would be a crazy chore. That might take a week to bust up and take with you. and then it's going to take a couple of days to put it back together. Yeah,
that seems, at that point, you're just better off just leaving it for the next person and going on and building a new one wherever you go, it sounds like.
Yeah. If it's cob, yeah. So cob, better, but cob slow. Better, but slow. Now, I'm fortunate because where I'm at, then I've got, I just go out to the ground, and in one spot I go digging, and it's like, oh, look, sharp sand. And in another spot it's like, oh, look, I've got clay. And then you mix the clay and the sharp sand together just right. And in fact, for me, I don't have to add straw. Some other people have to add straw. And then you mash it into whatever shape that you want. And it's like, oh, look, it looks like a bench. And then it dries out, and it's solid. Like, it feels like cement, but it's actually kind of like more comfortable than cement. I don't know how to describe that part. But the great thing is that it makes a fantastic mass for this. So your mass could possibly, if you've got the right kind of stuff in your on your land, then it could be free. But I think in an urban environment, I bet you're going to be hauling it in.
Yeah, most likely.
So the good news is, though, is that, like, let's say you haul it in and you go out and you buy all your materials, on the internet or Home Depot or whatever. I mean, you're probably going to spend about $200 to $300 for the whole thing, which is still a whole lot cheaper than buying like a wood stove, conventional wood stove. And then there's the whole thing now down in Texas. I don't know if you're going to heat your home with a conventional wood stove. I don't know. Imagine if you had like 1 or 2 cords of wood, it'd be like, that's plenty. You're all set. And so it doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal. But up here in Montana, a lot of people, it's like, oh, yeah, they're heating their home with 8 cords or 10 cords of wood. And so then if you can, like, take that from 10 cords of wood down to 1 cord of wood, that's powerful, convenient right there. That's a lot less hauling, a lot less wood chopping. Some people have been able to heat their homes with nothing but the branches that naturally fall off the trees in their yard.
Oh, wow.
One guy heated his home all winter long with nothing but junk mail. Damn right.
Now that's a good use for junk mail.
Here's what I think of your junk mail. So actually, suddenly when they start sending you too much junk mail, you don't mind. Actually, and it kind of seems like now, but this was a long time ago too. But it seems like now they don't send you as much junk mail.
Yeah, I guess a lot of the direct marketers are all going digital now. It's a lot less costly, and a lot less postal carriers that they find years later where it was just the postal carrier was never actually delivering it. They were just using it to heat their homes.
I think one of these days the United States Postal Service will get renamed to Netflix Delivery.
Yeah, I think so. Or Amazon Delivery. Actually, Amazon doesn't even offer U.S. Postal Service, I don't think. No, they don't.
Yeah, I don't know. I imagine what Amazon does is they kind of play the different, carriers off of each other, and these guys will deliver it in 2 days and charge us $2. If you could deliver it faster and charge $1.90, well, then we'll talk to you.
Yeah, that is. There's also a couple of different pieces of software that actually will take the person's address and then search for rates between the different carriers and see whichever one's cheaper, and then that's the one they use. And then they'll just say, all right, it's a flat end on the front end, which is totally not a survival topic, but a random bit of trivia from my days in e-commerce development. But anyway, going back to rocket mass heaters. Well, isn't it really neat? So, but that's neat as far as like someone just using one cord of wood if they're like in the southern part of Texas or something, which is really neat. And I guess as far as when you get into it, so like most people that are going to be in an urban environment that are retrofitting their home to use wood or doing something like this, how does this compare to, say, heating a home with gas or something like that?
Well, I think when it comes to heating your home with gas or heating your home with electricity or whatever else you might use, I mean, so often, it's multifaceted. Whatever the pollution is on the other end of either the pipe or the wire, and so there's all that pollution over there. And then it's kind of like, okay, so now that pollution, it does get to you. It just takes longer to get to you. Mm-hmm. And so, and I think there's something to be said for that. I mean, if we're polluting our planet, I mean, you get to pay for it one way or another. And then so the thing is one comparison is that, any pollution that's going to happen is right here. You can see it. You own it. It's in your space, and you're going to do something about it. I believe that this is far cleaner than natural gas or electric heat. In fact, I think that the only thing that might possibly challenge it, and I think that it's going to be a pretty even fight between rocket mass heaters and passive solar systems. And so passive solar would be the other one. Mm. And I with passive solar, you got to kind of rebuild your whole house.
Yeah.
If you're going to talk about heat, I mean, that's an architectural thing. So I'm kind of feeling if you got a conventional home and you're not going to rebuild it, then rocket mass heater is the cleanest and most sustainable way to heat your home. Now, I think that the other thing is that, like, what if the electricity goes out? What if the gas line stops putting gas to your house? Then what happens? Mm-hmm. And I kind of feel like, now it's pretty obvious that rocket mass heater, is the big winner. And so, it's one of those things where how much do you trust those guys? Maybe part of it is like, this is something you can build in a weekend. So you kind of, throw it together in a weekend, and it's like a novelty, if nothing else, like, hey, check this out. Mm-hmm. And then if things go wonky with your heat source, then it's like, not a problem. I got my plan B. Mm-hmm. Because the other thing is that, there is one major downside, and that is that if you're feeling chilled, you don't just turn a knob. Like, oh, I'm going to turn on the heat. It's like, no, you gotta start a fire, and you got to put the wood in, and that takes some. That's not as easy as turning a knob. But I do think that it's not that hard for a lot of people. The other thing is what are you gonna do if, like, let's say you still got all the electricity you need, and you got electric heat, get all the electricity you need, only now it costs 20 times more, because of stuff.
Yeah.
Or same story with your natural gas, and it's like, I mean, I'm sure if we wanted to, we could sit here and we could come up with 100 different ways things could go wonky. And then we could probably spend 80 hours talking about the different studies that have been done to show what the probability is of things going wonky in that way. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't be surprised if it turns out that there are current plans for these things to escalate in price dramatically over the next 5 years or so.
Yeah, I think certain people have even stated that that's their goal in life, but that's going down a completely different path. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, these things are not going to get cheaper. Nothing, by and large, generally gets cheaper. Things become more and more expensive, be it through inflation or scarcity or other means. Whereas this is not really something, and this is something that is really definitely boosts somebody's personal resilience and self-reliance.
So yeah, I think there's a certain amount of freedom that comes with it. So then it's like if it comes up in the news, they're gonna do stupid things to us, then it's like, I don't care.
Yeah, exactly.
Let them. I'm not worried about it. So good luck with that. I'm going to be over here. I got my trees and I got my rocket mass heater.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that there's something to be said for having that safety, because I don't know about you, but it's kind of like when I was young, these things would upset me so much, and I would be like, I have to shake my fist at the bad guys. I'm going to write my letters. I'm going to get together with my friends and complain about those dirty politicians. And turned out to not do a lick of good.
Yeah.
For me, I mean, maybe there's smarter people than me that are able to, like, I don't know, be real lobbyists or something, and go to politicians and say, stop doing that stupid stuff. And that it actually works. But it didn't work for me. Whereas this is something where it's like, okay, you know what? I can look out for number one. And now I'm okay. And on top of that, it's cleaner, it's better. I feel more comfortable. I feel safer. And as long as the system is still up and everything's cheap, it's like, no, not a problem. I can use the rocket mass heater 90% of the time. And if I'm feeling like I'm too damn lazy to put wood in the stove, I can just turn the knob up.
Mm-hmm.
Actually what I do is that it's like, okay, I will let it go, and I just leave the heater on at like 50, and it's like so it'll never freeze in the house, and then if I'm like, oh, that's cold, then I build a fire.
Oh, that's really interesting system.
I and then if things do go bad, well then don't be lazy, man.
Yeah, exactly.
Duh. Yeah, now it's you've got a fairly resilient system. So, like, I don't know if you're still working at your day job and you're living in town and you got a rocket mass heater and you have to go to work for 8 hours. Now, here's an important thing though. Usually for a rocket mass heater, you build a fire and you go, ooh, that's warm, and it heats the space up, 75 degrees. Oh, feel the heat. Oh, that's so warm. And then the fire goes out. But now the mass has been charged, and it will put out heat for days. So it's kind of like so at night you build your fire, and it's so warm in the house, and you get up in the morning, and it's still warm. So it was 75 last night. It's 72 this morning, and you get dressed, and you go to work, and you come home from work, and now it's like 69 in the house, and you think, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to build a fire. And this is and this recipe I just shared with you. This is for cold country where snow is on the ground all winter long.
Mm-hmm.
So now you're in Texas. You probably have a smaller system. But it'll still work pretty much the same. It's like I know in Texas in winter when it gets really cold, what does it get to, like 55?
Well, yeah. Actually, this year we've had a total of 5 or maybe even 8 really cold days, I think it actually got to 30 or something.
Oh,
yeah, I know that's crazy talk around here, but usually our winters are about 50. Sometimes in the evenings they'll dip down into the 40s, but it's usually around 50. It's like, oh, light jacket and sweater weather.
See, I was in Houston once in the summer, and I'm just trying to wrap my head around the idea that it could ever possibly get down to 30, because it was not anywhere close to 30.
Yeah, it gets kind of warm, and that's been one of our big trials with breeding rabbits and keeping the rabbits even alive during the summers here. They're out there basically like, just give me the knife, I'll take the fur off myself. Just get me out of this fur coat. I don't care how you do it.
Maybe the thing we should talk about are ways to use permaculture techniques to kind of keep your stuff cold. But it's kind of awkward. It seems silly to call them permaculture techniques when in reality, I imagine you guys probably know all the stuff that is in our toolbox for cooling in the summer.
Now, see, the funny thing is, and I think this is the blessing and curse of modern convenience known as air conditioning, especially in places like Houston, where by and large, no one leaves the indoors during the summer because you're worried about spontaneously combusting. So I think in a lot of ways, people without AC have no idea how to keep themselves cool. Using permaculture techniques and unfortunately, like the water vapor system, the swamp coolers and stuff like that, in most areas they do work. Houston is so humid, you just make a wet, soppy mess worse, really. So no, definitely, let's dive into those techniques that you were just talking about.
Okay, nearly everything in permaculture is about trees. Add trees. I mean, if you had these great, big, enormous deciduous trees out in your yard, I mean, like they're 150 feet tall, they're monster trees, then I think, I don't know if you've ever like been strolling through Houston, with your cock of the walk, and then you go by an enormous tree, a monster giant tree, and you walk through the shade of it. I mean, it'll be 20 degrees cooler. Mm-hmm. On a hot day, it'll be, on a monster tree, granted, if it's a big tree, it'll be 10 degrees cooler, but under a monster tree, it's 20 degrees cooler. So I don't know if you've ever experienced that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I certainly have.
Yeah. So step one, monster tree, get one. All right, moving along. Now, the thing that the tree provides is not only layers of shade, but it's transpiring water the whole time. And it's cooling, and then the water is going to condense on the grass below, which is going to then go down and feed the roots of the tree again. So the tree's got this plan. But the other thing is that it's just shade, just layers of shade. In fact, there's the key: layers of shade. So it's like wherever you've got a window, then have a shade that's outside, hanging off the eave in front of the window, and then have another shade that's still outside over the window. I mean, you can let in some dappled light. You don't have to make it like a totally dark cave inside, but it's the shade upon shade. It's the layers, having layers of shade, and then of course inside you've got your curtains and whatnot. But there's that. The other thing is that if you have, I'm sure that you're already familiar with like things like venting your attic space appropriately. Mm-hmm. That's an enormous one. Then it starts coming into the things of look at how people stay cool when they're in places like Saudi Arabia, or the Sahara, things where it's like, you think it's hot, but you just don't know hot till you've been there.
Yeah.
And so then they've got these systems where there'll be a black tube coming out of the top of their house, which is going to make it so that when the sun hits it, then it's going to start moving convective air. It's a thermosiphon, just like what we have in the rocket mass heater. And then they've got like a pipe that goes under the house, but underground. And then so it pulls air in underground and then into the house. And so what is the constant ground temperature there? It's probably something like 60.
Mm-hmm. Actually, isn't it at a certain depth? Isn't it? It's a constant. What was it? Is it 50 to 55 or 52 degrees?
But see, that changes from place to place in the world.
Yeah.
So, like, if you're far enough north, then it's permafrost. I mean, so you go down 20 feet, it's frozen. Mm-hmm. But now you get into the tropical areas, and whatever that temperature is probably really warm. And in a desert, it's probably really, really warm. But where you're at, it's going to be whatever it's as if it's the average temperature of the average temperature of each day. It's kind of like that.
Okay.
So you take anyway. It's the total average of all the averages for that spot. And so in your area, I'm going to guess it's 60, but it might be warmer or colder. But then if you've got 60 degree air coming in your house, that's going to feel nice, I would imagine.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So there's more and more ideas. I mean, have water features in your yard. I mean, if your entire yard is, if you've got these big monster trees and it's covering your roof, if your roof is covered, that is going to do a lot to help keep your entire house plenty cool. So, and then, there's all the tricks that I think everybody knows, where it's like, open up your windows at night. Although I don't know if that would work in Houston.
Yeah, it doesn't work too well. And I think just in general, keeping any kind of open orifice in Houston, you might have somebody join you in the middle of the night you didn't expect necessarily want.
I remember seeing a picture of a house in Texas, and they're saying, they're talking about how everybody has air conditioning, but it's like you really kind of get the idea that for air conditioning in this particular spot, because it was like the picture of a house and their front yard was rocks. It was all rocks. There were no trees at all. And it was like, I don't know, a style, I guess. And all I could think is like, wow, I'll bet that they have the most expensive air conditioning bill on the block. Whereas if you do this thing with a bunch of trees and you do the layers around the windows, and in fact, not even just around the windows, layers around the entire house, so you have a deep eave, and then you'll hang things from the eaves and help keep the entire house cool. Now, granted, this isn't going to, win any beauty contests, but, it's just one of those things where if you start doing these layers of shading, then it's amazing how much it does to keep things much, much cooler. Sorry, if nothing else, you still have your air conditioning if you want, only your air conditioner bill is going to be a lot less.
Yeah, and I think that's a big thing, especially in areas like this. You get ridiculous AC bills. I think I easily last year got several AC bills that were in the $400 range. And that's just, you go months and months on end of that. That's a pretty miserable way to spend your money.
Now, one of the big things that we talked about, and because like you just mentioned this $400 electric bill, and I know that I was down speaking in San Diego, and it sounded like a lot of people have a $200 a month water bill, and and then of course these people, a lot of them are trying to be resilient, in case of or even to have a better life. I think that people who have concerns over what are they doing to my food. A lot of them are like, well, I'm going to grow at least a little bit of my own food. And so then the trick becomes, how do you grow food without irrigation? And so we've done a lot of work in that space, and we've had a lot of great success in eliminating the water bill. But that's part of it too. If you've got a garden outside and it's not requiring any irrigation, a lot of times, just having all this vegetation growing is going to help keep the general vicinity cooler.
See, now that's a really interesting topic, because I know California's having the huge drought problems right now, but Texas was going through massive droughts for years, and I think it's just finally starting to break, which was a really weird thing for Houston. Houston has always been such a tropical climate. The summers are, if the sun's not just beating you up, it's only because it's pouring down rain in buckets. But then we went a couple of years here where we'd go a month or 2 months without rain, and it was just the most bizarre thing for us. And I know we had a wild edibles guy on a couple weeks ago, that's from this area, and Meriwether. And we were talking about how the local park that he's very involved in has just been completely decimated. So this is a really interesting topic, and I think it's one of those things that even if you're from a wet area, it can be very much a shock to the system where suddenly that area is not wet anymore. So this is great stuff.
Well, I got to tell you, I'm not. It's one of those bizarre things where when I get invited to come and teach about horticultural things outside of Montana. I could understand somebody in Colorado having me over, but instead these places like San Diego keeps having me come back, and it's like, I don't understand. I feel like I don't know your guys' plants. Mm-hmm. And so, but I can address how to mitigate drought and dry, and a lot of times, the drought is not so much drought as much as it is desertification. And so a lot of our practices for agriculture are leading to desertification. And so then it is, making it so that land that was once lush and jungle is on its way to becoming the Sahara.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know China's having a huge problem with that.
I think it's a relatively global thing. Now there are people that are doing things that are permaculture, and they're able to reverse desertification, and they're actually being able to in places where like that was jungle, like Borneo was jungle. Then they got this great idea of like, hey, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to cut down these trees and I'm going to sell them, and I'm going to get rich. And so they cut them all down. They sold them. They got rich. And then they're like, and now I'm done here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been desert ever since. And so now there's this guy, Willie Smits. He's going in and he is getting trees started there again. And he's like, okay, I got my 20,000 acres here. And nobody gets to do anything until stuff gets going. All right. So y'all just stay out for a little bit. We're going to, and then thump, instant jungle. And so then water's cleaner, but most importantly, after 3 years, they recorded a 25% increase in rainfall.
Oh, wow.
So they're reversing desertification. And this is a pretty common permaculture thing.
Mm-hmm.
So we use these techniques to like be able to have a garden that you don't have to irrigate.
Well, see, now, and that brings up the interesting thing, because I know a lot of stuff, especially in the prepper community, a lot of it has to do with rural environments. But as far as urban environments, how much can you actually produce on a typical urban lot of a quarter acre or a little bit less?
Well, the answer to that question is the same as the answer to nearly all questions. It depends.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think one good thing to look at is that there's a guy that was in Portland on an urban lot, and he carefully measured how much food he ate, and his wife, and then how much came from his garden, how much he brought in from outside, and he was also very emphatic to not bring in additional fertilizers. So and then basically after years and years of doing this, he came to the conclusion that if he continued to optimize all of his systems, that he believed that 5 years further down the road, that he would be able to feed one person on an urban lot year round. And now a lot of people make a lot of claims like, oh, I'm feeding 30 people off my garden. And I think what they mean to say is I'm feeding 30 people a few tomatoes off of my garden.
Yeah.
Which is totally different than like, having the food all year long for a person.
Yeah.
So now in order to feed this one person without bringing anything in from off the property, it would require a significant amount of work to work the system and keep it at that level of production to feed one person. Now, on the other hand, if you're okay with bringing stuff in, I think off of one urban lot, I would guess you could, if you worked really, really hard, you could feed 20 people. I'm not going to say this for sure, but I'm qualifying with could, maybe, possibly. I think wouldn't bet on it, but I wouldn't be surprised if it happened either.
Yeah.
20 people off of one urban lot, but now you're bringing in like tons and tons of materials. You're bringing in lots of either compost or manures or fertilizers or something. You're basically going to put in 10 calories to get 1 calorie back out.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you start playing that game, then yeah, you can do a lot more food. But with that guy over in Portland, basically he's growing his own fertilizers, and he's doing all kinds of cyclic stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But he's doing permaculture, and the thing is it's like if you got a garden going, and you've got that system that requires all those inputs. Let's say you're feeding 20 people, and then things go wonky, then suddenly I imagine that all that material that you used to bring in, first of all, you probably don't have the fuel to go pick it up.
Right.
And then it could turn out to be that the people that were generating it aren't generating anymore. And then if it's still available even after that, then it's kind of like somebody else probably wants it more than you, and then you don't get it.
Yeah, that's one of the, as we've been playing with our own urban farm, which is, when I say farm, it's just chickens and rabbits at this point. We haven't the area that we're in, we're having an issue with water and getting water into that area. All we really do is produce a whole lot of compost, which is great. But I guess that's how much of that, as far as techniques go, the guy that was feeding himself, how much of it was producing compost through animals and things like that.
Well, here's another thing too, is going out and getting all these materials, whether it's compost or manures, and bringing it. I don't know about you, but to me that sounds like work.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like hard and sweaty and stuff, and I'm lazier than that. So, but okay, you mentioned you pushed one of my buttons. You said the word compost. I want to go on my little compost rant for a little bit, and that is that I mean, like I've been crazy about composting for years. I did my certified master gardener thing back in 1996, and I just did compost in 8 different ways. I loved compost. Everything was about composting, and I was going out and bringing in all these materials to compost. And then I later went and got 80 acres, and I didn't have any compost. And the reason is that all my animals were in pens that we moved around. And so whenever the soil was really weak, then that's where we would plant these little shelters. And then that would be where the soil was very happy the next year.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't have a bunch of manure to work with. And all the kitchen scraps, instead of going in the compost pile, were going out to the pigs or the chickens. So I didn't have that either. So everything that I used to compost just wasn't available anymore. So it was gone. So there's that. Now, here's the big thing, is that one of the bigs in horticulture from like the 20s and 40s, so a long time ago, was Ruth Stout. And I remember reading in Ruth Stout's book, that she called the no work garden, that she didn't have a compost pile. Whenever she had kitchen scraps, she would just go outside, pick up some mulch, and pitch the kitchen scraps under it and put the mulch back down. And I just kind of thought, well, that can't be nearly as good as compost. So I kind of skipped over it. But I got to tell you, it was about a year ago, I kind of got to thinking about this. And it's like, with a compost pile, you start off with this enormous pile of raw material. And you're going to mix it all up, which, by the way, mixing it all up, that sounds like work. Noted. Note, work. Okay, but mix it all up, and then it gets hot and smaller. It gets like 20 times smaller. It's 1/20th of the original size. 95% of whatever was there is now not there. Now, do you know where it went?
Vapor.
You're close. I mean, so yeah, the watery bits would have gone up as water vapor. But the organic matter that you put into it is dominantly carbon and nitrogen. Now, our atmosphere is like 80% nitrogen. And then our atmosphere also has, carbon dioxide, hence carbon dioxide. So like a tree is dominantly carbon. So when you take twigs and other things and you go and you compost them, then it kind of like takes the carbon, does the carbon dioxide thing, and it goes up in the air. And then plus, carbon and nitrogen, those are the 2 big things that we really, really, really want in the soil. Carbon leads to organic matter in the soil, and nitrogen is like a plant's favorite food.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, so instead of putting it into the soil, we have this process of putting it into the air, and that would be called composting. Now, granted, the stuff that you end up with is like magic sauce. You go out and you put it, like, you can do anything with it on the garden, and it is amazing. But the thing that's even more amazing is to do what Ruth Stout did. You take your mulch, you slap a little bit of that organic matter on, put the mulch back down. It will break down, but the chances are that the microorganisms and the roots of the plants will bring it into the soil long before it has a chance to go up into the atmosphere.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
Now you don't have to go out. I mean, the lazy factor is amazing. I mean, you're still hauling stuff out of the house, but what else are you going to do? You're not going to leave it in the house. You're still hauling stuff, but now you don't have to turn compost, and you get to use it right away. So it's got, I mean, granted, it's not a perfect system. It's got some flaws in it, some downsides, but I think the upsides vastly outweigh the downsides. I mean, now that I've put this bug in your ear, the next time you go out and you start turning a compost pile, I bet you it'll be your last time, because you're gonna be thinking, I remember that obnoxious guy on the podcast. He is, you know what? I don't think I'm gonna do this anymore. This is, stupid. So,
yeah, I think for us the issue that we run into is our our rabbits are over a concrete area. So for us, it's a constant game of having, and since the rabbits are in a commercial warehouse district area, we have to kind of move out all the waste. One of the things, and this is maybe a horrible way to do it, it's been pretty successful for us though, is instead of having kind of a traditional, like, here's our pile with the chicken wire around and everything else, we have about an 18-foot long row. And each week we move the entire pile about 1.5 feet. And then we dump the new stuff at the beginning of the pile. And then we found that as it works its way down, by the time it gets to the end, it's soil. And it's, of course, always interesting to watch how we started off with this huge pile, and by the time it gets to the end, it's, like you were saying, a 20th of the size. But that was, if we were in a different situation, that would be really neat, just putting it out there. Because I know we do lose so much of what we produce, or not what we produce, it's what the rabbits and chickens are producing. But interesting stuff.
I mean, I've never raised rabbits, but of course, being in the position that I've been in for many years now, I get to hear all these different rabbit stories. So of course, I'm not sure if you're aware, but a rabbit generates 2 different kinds of pellets. One pellet is exactly what you think, and the other pellet is like designed to be run through the rabbit one more time.
Really?
Yeah. And so, but the thing is that if they're in a hutch, then the second kind of pellet ends up being out of their reach, and they don't get a chance to run it through a second time.
Huh.
So, it sounds bizarre and crazy to me, but apparently that's how a rabbit's wired. And I got to tell you, now granted, you're in an urban environment, there really isn't another way. But if you had a little bit more acreage, the thing I would want to look into is the colony style raising rabbits. I've read some people that have not had success, but I've read from some people that have had success, and I think I would want to study the people who've had success.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people start studying it and they're like, oh, I'm not going to do it because of people having it not working out. And I'm thinking like, no, don't listen to those people. Listen to the people that have had success. And so, but to me, it's like, because I remember like my when I was a kid, my cousins had rabbits and hutches, and it just was like somehow I don't see why you're doing this. I mean, shouldn't this animal be a little bit more, freer, a little bit more out there and stuff? And but you know what I've learned is that I'm wired a weird way. I want to treat the animals better. I want to have a little bit more respect for the animals. I know that Jack Spirko gives me a bunch of hassles over this. I've got all the stuff about how to raise chickens, and his position is it's just a chicken, and it's like, well, okay, so to Jack it's just a chicken, but to me it's a creature, and the fact that I'm putting any animal in a cage makes me think that I am now assuming the responsibility as a decent human being to give it a better life than it would have had in the wild.
See, I'm actually completely in agreement with you, and my my co-host that works with me on our little farm is more of the Jack Spirko. It's just an animal, whereas I'm like, hey, you know what? We're responsible for things. I think he was making fun of me once because I was buying the rabbits toys. And he was like, these are food. They're not pets. Why are you petting them all the time and giving them toys? And I'm like, well, they're in these cages and I got to do something. They look bored.
Have you seen the Farmstead Meatsmith stuff?
No, I haven't.
Like, they've got a series of videos called Anatomy of Thrift. And what a beautiful poetic thing about pigs. But it applies. And so then basically it talks about how we've become disconnected from our food. Mm-hmm. And how it used to be that you would raise a few pigs, and you could give them names, and you could feel joy when you see them in the morning, and they would be happy to see you. And, on harvest day, you harvest them because that's their function.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can find amazing deliciousness in the food. And frankly, I have to wonder, like if let's say you and I are gonna raise chickens, and Jack and that other guy are gonna raise chickens. I bet I don't know why. And there's no white paper. I've got no scientific evidence of any kind, but I'll bet ours tastes better.
What was it? I think it's Bluebell, who I don't know if you have it up there, but Bluebell is like a really big like ice cream and dairy thing around here. And their big slogan is happy cows make better milk or something or make better tasting milk or something like that, or better ice cream. But I'm with you. But, I guess from a moral standpoint, or perhaps ethical, depending on how you're going to look at it, I look at it as almost earning the right to eat the animal. I mean, I'm going to do it anyway so that it does become, like you were saying, my responsibility to do best by that animal that I can, without going completely insane and turning them into Kobe rabbits, which is what my partner Jason keeps teasing me about.
I kind of feel like, think about a vegan. And I think that what a vegan is trying to do is noble. I mean, on the other hand, I don't think anybody is I've yet to experience anybody as hostile as a vegan, but but I do think that what a vegan shoots for is a noble and good thing, although it turns out to be total horseshit. Well, and I think most vegans are not aware of all the animals that are killed in order to be able to come up with their organic crops, which are grown in monocrops and in rows. And which is where I'm kind of thinking, like, if you're going to be a vegan, you really need to explore growing your own garden. Although, and whenever a vegan starts trying to tell me anything about how studies have shown something about veganism, it's like, I haven't read any studies on this, but my impression is that anything beats a vegan diet when a vegan diet is nothing but Diet Coke and Oreos.
Yeah, yes.
Pure speculation on my part. And because the thing that they do is that they'll show a vegan diet is made of wholesome, nutritious, good, organic food. And granted, organic has lost its standard in a lot of ways. So organic is even kind of weak. But a good, wholesome, home-cooked, organic meal, and it's always 3 times a day with snacks, all organic, all wholesome, all cooked, it's like you got an on-site chef versus toxic waste dump food.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, and then surprise, the vegan one did better. And I kind of feel like that was not a fair test.
Yeah.
If you want to show how the meat's not okay, then let's take the exact same food you're eating, and we'll add 20% meat. And now let's see who's doing it. By the way, we won't just add any meat, because meat that's raised in a non-organic fashion, all the pesticides that are on those plants concentrate in the fat cells.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you're eating something that's like concentrated pesticides. And so it's like, no, let's also do organic. It'll be organic, grass-fed. And so you've got your vegan on one side. Now that's a fair test. But if you want to do unfair, right. Vegan diet is Oreos and Diet Coke. And now let's do a comparison. That'll be fair. All right. So I'm wandering off in the woods a little bit, but
no, that's okay.
I think the thing is to try and say, if we're going to go out and we're going to have an impact on life, and I mean, there really isn't a way to avoid consuming life. And I think I've heard a lot of people say that, with veganism, it's a vertebrate bias, but let's leave that aside. I mean, I think that I like the idea of, if somebody doesn't want to kill something that has a cute face, they'll eat fish. Oh yeah, I'll eat a fish, no problem. And they'll eat eggs, or maybe they'll be strictly vegan, no animal products whatsoever. Which, of course, I'm sorry, thousands of animals were killed to bring in the carrot harvest this year. Not only the ground nesting animals, because they plowed 4 times instead of just once, because they're doing it organically. Whereas if they'd sprayed, they would have plowed less and it would have killed fewer animals. Anyway, so very rich and complicated. But I think that what they want is a noble thing to want and to try. I'm so glad that they're trying. and that's a good and healthy thing to try.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when you start traveling down this road of like going to care for the animal, and to authentically care, and because like a lot of people raising chickens, it's kind of like this whole thing. I must be a good farmer because most of these chickens haven't died, and it's kind of like, I think when a person really cares, they really take ownership of any animal ever getting sick, and it's like, I must have done something wrong. I'm going to own that, and what have I done wrong? How can I make things better?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a far more noble path than being a vegan.
I guess to circle back to permaculture in an urban environment, what techniques do actually fit best into an urban environment?
I want to say hugelkultur.
Really?
I mean, well, the thing is that hugelkultur is something that it's something where you put a lot of energy in at one go, and then it has payback for 20, 30 years. Now, in your environment, it might have payback for only 15 or 20 years, whereas up here, it might go as long as 40.
That's interesting. Just real quickly, what's the difference?
It has to do with where it's warmer. The microbials in the soil stay active all year.
Oh, okay.
Whereas it's like right now I look out my window and we're kind of having a blizzard right now. And so the microbials in the soil are either dormant or semi-dormant or dead.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah,
they're
not to rub it in, but I
from...
think it's actually 76 here today.
Well, since it's snowing, it must be below freezing outside here. I think we're looking at about 25 today.
Oh, wow.
But the thing is that all those microbials, when they're active, they're chomping on organic matter. And so a hugelkultur bed is going to be, like 80% organic matter. And so, it's going to go away faster where you are.
Okay.
But the big thing is that people understand it. Of all the techniques that we have, this is one that people can really wrap their heads around easily. I mean, another good technique is to plant trees, and most urban lots are capable of handling a few more trees. And there's gobs of other benefits that come with planting lots of trees. And then there's we can talk about which tree to plant, but I don't think I can do that conversation very well for Texas. But hugelkultur, though, is going to be just this universal slam dunk. Not only are the benefits of hugelkultur beds are so massive, and on top of that, for a lot of people who already have trees or brush, then they're currently taking all that woody matter and they're hauling it off. And it's kind of like, hey, well, rather than hauling it off, here's an idea for you. Oh, you could use it to run your rocket mass heater. That would be one. But hugelkultur is another one. And so you take all this wood and you mix it in with the soil and you make it into a great big stack about 6 feet tall. And now you've got something where on the second or third year, you'll be able to grow your garden in this, and you won't have to water it all summer long.
So I guess from a high level view for people that aren't familiar with hugelkultur, what, in a very basic way, what is it?
Soil on wood.
Okay. So is 6 feet kind of a hard, fast rule? Can they be shallower? Can they be deeper? How does that work exactly?
Right. If they're smaller, you're going to have to water. So the reason why people are bonkers for 6 feet is because we just have so many people with experience where at 6 feet they didn't have to water it at all.
Okay.
Now, and it's like the first year you'll typically have mediocre luck, but we've got people where in the first year they didn't water it at all and they had great success too. It kind of depends on what materials you're starting off with.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. And going from there, what else would you introduce into an urban environment? Trees.
I mean, especially in your environment, the more trees, then the more shade you're going to have, the cooler it's going to be. And then with trees, then you can have some things growing out in full sun, and you can have some things growing in full shade, and you got all the little spots in between, because different plants have different desires for sun. But it's amazing what a tree. So for a tree, if it's able to reach down and find deep water, and this is best done if you start the tree in your yard from seed, which I know a lot of people are reluctant to do, but if you start it from seed, it'll be able to, its roots will go down deeper. And then what happens is it transpires water out of the leaves, which ends up as morning dew. So now if you've just got more morning dew on all your growies, then you've reduced your need for water.
Oh, interesting. Okay. And at the time of the day that they're most likely to actually suck the water in and not just get vaporized by the sun.
Well, there's some of that, but then it's also like, if you have a single point in time where all the dew accumulates, then it's more likely to go into the soil. So, but it has to do with the changing temperatures of the day and stuff like that. Probably the biggest tool in the toolbox is going to be mulch. And I imagine all of your listeners are already familiar with mulch, but there's a couple of things that people might not be aware of to use as mulch. And one is going to be twigs. If you take your loppers or pruners and you cut your twigs up into 1 foot long pieces, it makes an excellent mulch. And it kind of comes back to that whole thing where people they have all this brush and it's like, oh, I'm going to go put it in that big green can and it'll get hauled off by the garbage man. And it's like, no, that's valuable organic matter. Don't be doing that. So no, that's awesome. Awesome, amazing mulch. Another good mulch is rocks. I mean, the thing is, mulch's job is to reduce evaporation, lots. So the thing is, if you got exposed soil and that top millimeter of soil dries out, then what happens is that the water that's underneath that kind of wicks up to that.
Okay.
Then more water dries out, then more wicks up, then more dries out, and more wicks up, and more dries out. And next thing you know, the stuff that was soil is now like a big hunk of cement, and nothing will grow in it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all petrified and dry. So, but on the other hand, if you put something over it, some kind of mulch that won't wick, then the top part of the soil doesn't dry out. And so you're not wicking all the water out.
Okay.
Mulch, the power of mulch. So if your mulch is just like rocks, like, oh, somehow when I dig out in my yard, I get lots of rocks. And it's like, oh, those rocks are powerful, useful. So rocks are good, twigs are good. I mean, granted, there's other sources of mulch. A real popular permaculture one is chop and drop. And it's like, oh, out in my garden, all these grasses started to grow, and I don't want them. So you go and you cut a bunch of them down, and you get a big wad of them that's so thick that you put them on other grasses, it chokes them out.
Mm-hmm.
Chop and drop. But now here's the thing about permaculture systems. If you set up your permaculture system just right, then your garden will continue to pump out food year after year after year, and you won't have to do anything but harvest. You won't have to fertilize. You won't have to irrigate. You won't have any bug problems. You won't even have to plant seeds. All you got to do is harvest. Now, if you go in there and you nurture it, it'll like triple or quadruple the harvest. But, you don't have to. Maybe the thing is that, summer rolls around, it's pumping out its food, and, you got to go to work.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're going to work and all the food's falling off, and it's like, yeah, no problem. And then you come home from work and you eat some of it, but you don't really have time to like fool with it. Not a problem. The system keeps going. And then 3 years later, oh no, things happen. And food now costs 100 times more. And Monsanto finally had their way, and Monsanto now owns all food everywhere except for what's in your garden.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of you've now decided, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to nurture my garden a little bit, and it's going to produce 3 or 4 times more. That's the way I roll now. That's cool.
Interesting stuff, and that raises a lot of different things. So as far as like preparing the food that you collect after Monsanto has become the evil Darth Vader, and their Death Star is actually complete. How do you actually prepare that food and keep it post shit hit the fan?
So you're talking about food preservation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I think this is one of those things where if you just have the stuff in your head, then it gives you such superpowers when this happens. But it doesn't mean like every year you got to go do it. But I mean, canning, of course, is going to be really popular in the United States for the last 100 years or more. But I just want to point out that the Native Americans, the Indians, their big thing was to dry everything, dry it, and they would just they for a lot of it. They would just like have a bunch of rocks out in the sun and they would just set it on the rocks and then it would dry it and then they'd put it away and then they would like boil it up later. Like when they would reconstitute it, like just add water, boom, steak. So drying was free and very common. And if nothing else, it's good to just know that that's what they did. And it's like there wasn't much else. Now there are lots of other things that you can do. I mean, a lot of people love to freeze, but if the electricity stops, then freezing's pretty weak. Canning, you can still do canning. If you got all the gear, and now they're coming out with a lot of reusable lids and stuff like that of different varieties, and you can do the canning even when there's no power and the stores are gone and whatever else. You can keep on canning, no problem. So I like the canning, but drying is a good one to have out there. In fact, if you're going to build a solar thing, I think the most effective use of solar power is going to be a solar food dryer.
Those are really neat. My brother actually built one for a science project more than years. I think it was this was 25 years ago. But yeah, those are really neat. And I was shocked as a kid, and I'm still shocked as an adult how effective they are.
It is wild how much food the amount of food that will run through one of those. I mean, the ones that I've been seeing in the last 5 years or so, they're like bigger than a refrigerator. They're enormous. And the amount of food they'll put into them is huge. And day and a half, everything's dry, and then the quality that comes out is fantastic. So it's and then I just want to point out that there's ways that you would think it would work, and apparently that's not the way. The best one is where you've got like a glass on diagonal, kind of perpendicular to the sun, and it goes to the top of the drying shed. And then the hot air goes down, and then it goes back up the other side. That is considered to be the optimal design for a solar food dryer, which seems like counterintuitive, but that's been the thing that's really been working great.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean that's kind of counter to what I would even think it would be, but that's really neat. I'm gonna have to look that up myself.
I have a video on YouTube about it. I show 3 different ones.
Well, that's perfect, and that segues us perfectly into, tell us about, you've got some really great stuff you've been putting out and we were even talking a little bit about the show, just how much energy and passion that you've been putting into the things, like even the jump drives that you were saying, like you're putting these jump drives together for jump drives. Sorry, I think I watched Star Trek or something before we got on. These USB key drives that you're doing for people that are in areas that either just want the information for cold storage or for people that are in areas that don't necessarily have the greatest internet connection. And you also had your great DVD series on rocket mass heaters and all this stuff. Tell us about all this great stuff that you've been putting out lately, including your YouTube channel and everything else.
So yes, I'm selling warp drives for that commute, and for when you want to travel across the United States. Sure, that Elon Musk thing's talking about that train, but that's nothing compared to warp drive. So, a loser. So I always call those little memory sticks. I always call them jump drives. I mean, what would you call them?
I usually call them USB drives, but for some reason, when I started saying jump drive, I was like, what am I talking about?
Okay. So, a year and a half ago, there was a workshop about rocket mass heaters. and it sold out. And then a bunch of people were saying, "Hey, could you video it? Could you video?" Because I make all these lame YouTube videos. I've got like 160 YouTube videos, and they're saying like, "Could you video it? And I'll buy the video off of you." And so I videoed the whole thing, and then it's like time to start, putting it together. And it's like, this is like a lot of work. And I'm so lazy. How does this happen? And so I came up with what I thought was a brilliant idea. I'll do a Kickstarter. The Kickstarter will be not funded, and I'll say, "Oh, shucks. Didn't get funded. I guess you don't get to have the videos. Sorry." I thought I was pretty clever there. And then here's what happened instead. 900 people funded my Kickstarter.
Oh shit, now you got to do the work.
Yes, we want to see the video from that. Now I got to do the work, but with so many people putting the money in, it's like, wow, look at all that money. Whoa. It's like I struck oil. I'm using this analogy because you're in Houston.
Yeah.
It's like I struck oil. Okay. All right. So, anyway, so it's all it is video of this workshop about rocket mass heaters. And, so all the people that know about my stuff and I don't know, actually paid attention were like, "Yay, video of the workshop." And I've had like 6 people who have been just extremely hostile, who are like, I don't know, I guess their expectation is that it would be like this Hollywood presentation of rocket mass heaters or something.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but the people that are like saying these nasty things, that seems to stick with you more than all the happy people.
Yeah, I know how that goes.
So, if people are going to go and buy these rocket mass heater DVDs, they're out. I mean, so we did the Kickstarter. In fact, it was about a year ago. We did the Kickstarter, fully funded. And then afterwards, so many people still wanted them that we went ahead and printed up a bunch of extras, and I stuck them out at Amazon. So you can go and find, it's a 4 DVD set. The first DVD is fire science, and so it talks about all these bizarre things about fire and heat that you probably never knew, because the whole contraption for the rocket mass heaters does this in a different way. I mean, everything works in a different fashion. So the first one's about the fire science. The second one is called Sneaky Heat, and that's going to be about the rocket mass heaters. The third one's called Boom Squish, and that's about trying to heat hot water. And yeah, I mean, if you use a pressurized system and you throw heat in it the wrong way, it will explode. I mean, this is some seriously dangerous stuff. There's a great Mythbusters where they build a house to code, and it's just a little micro tiny house, like 6 feet by 6 feet. And inside this code house, there's nothing but a water heater. And then they do 2 things. One is that they cap off the pressure relief valve because it looks like a little faucet, like it's going to piddle on your floor. So people will actually go out and buy caps and stick them on that. And then what they did is that they shorted out the thermostat so that it would just always just keep making things hot.
Mm-hmm.
And then they had like this whole other building that's like this bulletproof bomb structure building so that they can video what happens while staying safe behind the building. So then they're bored, and then boom, the house explodes, and it's like there's nothing left. It's like the biggest pieces are maybe 6 inches across.
Mm-hmm.
It's just pulverized. And so the guys walk out and they're like looking at this and they're like, I don't even see metal fragments from the hot water heater. And they're wandering around in the stuff for like 30 seconds trying to find pieces of water heater when all of a sudden, clang! It shot up into the air, and it was up there so long, it took all that time to come back down.
Mm-hmm.
So they said this was the biggest explosion that they've ever had on their show. So that's why we call it Boom Squish. this is some seriously dangerous stuff. So be very careful. A lot of people, I mean, there's a lot of information about how to do it and why to do it and stuff like that. But one thing that was left out, they would only let me video it if you leave out the exact instructions on how to build this. And so there's a lot of stuff about how to build it, but not the exact directions. So don't get your hopes up for Boom Squish. And then the last one's called Hot Rocket. And this covers like rocket stoves. And we did this cook-off between, we had a propane turkey cooker, and then we made up one that was the same thing, but with a rocket stove, and the rocket stove won. But then it's like, wow, that sure is hot in there. So this guy comes by, he's a blacksmith, and we just start dropping chunks of metal in there to see how fast it'll heat up to, like, bright yellow. And it's taking 40 seconds.
Oh,
like,
wow.
Watch this. Stick it in there and pull it out. Jeez, look at that. And so it's kind of a poor man's foundry.
Oh, that's really neat.
Yeah, we did a bunch of stuff. So anyway, the last one goes over, and pocket rockets. This is where it's basically a barrel or a bucket, and you put pipes in it in such a way that it becomes kind of like a quickie stove.
Okay.
And so we got some of those. And then the last DVD is a bunch of bits and bobs and this and that. So there you go. This is a thing that I sell now. And I'm an accidental businessman.
But I think those are the best kinds of businesses, because it's usually actually born out of not, hey, let's make a few dollars. It's usually like, hey, there's this really cool thing that I know that I in turn want other people to know. But that's really cool. And did you say you also had some playing cards?
Yeah. Now this is something that I worked on very intentionally, because when you're bonkers about permaculture, then your friends and family think you're crazy. You try to describe things but they've already been told through Fox News how you're wrong. So, so you must be crazy. So, but the thing is that it's like the cards, if you hand a deck of cards to somebody, like say at Christmas in their stocking, then they can open it up and they'll look at like 2 or 3 cards and go, oh, an electric tractor. That's kind of a neat thing. And, and then it's like, oh, there's the rocket mass heater. And it's like, huh. And they can read the little notes about the rocket mass heater. Anyway, so there's 52 cards that have 52 different permaculture things. And the Kickstarter did amazingly well. I think the artist that did the drawing did an amazing job. And I think that they turned out really good. We sold the Kickstarter. We sold I think it was 7,000 decks.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and so we've now got a few left out at Amazon. And so people and then we had some people. This is now I'm gonna play my sour grape song because I'm angry about this.
Okay.
And it's like there's some people like, oh, you know what? I wanna have this. I have this store and I'm gonna sell them and I said, well, the only thing I ask is that you don't sell it for less than. I mean, I'll give you a good deal, no problem. I want to infect brains, get them out there, no problem. But all I ask is respect the people who supported my Kickstarter. So don't sell them for less than what they're on the Kickstarter. And now you go out to Amazon, and that's exactly what they're doing. They're selling for less.
Oh, man.
So it's like, I'm kind of mad. And I was like, damn it, what are you guys? No. And yet, no. So what are you going to do? I can't. There's nothing I can do.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be a little bit more careful in the future, I guess.
Yeah. Well, now, here's another thing. You're having a chicken duel. Is that right?
Yeah. So your buddy Jack Spirko, he has me on his show once in a while, and I'm on his expert council. And but whenever he has a chicken thing, he doesn't like my position on chickens, and so he turns it over to this other guy. And so now this woman calls up, and she's got a question about chickens, and she says, well, I was going to do what the other guy says. But then I read Paul Wheaton's article about chickens, and now I don't think that's a good idea. So Jack called it a duel, but he only invited the other guy. I didn't get invited.
How's that a duel?
I don't know. I don't know. But so what we did was, is that I have my own podcast. And so we recorded a podcast to respond to the duel. and of course, being the arrogant bastard that I am, I declared myself the winner. But yeah, that doesn't really fly, does it? But the thing is that when raising chickens, I'm an advocate of paddock shift. Now, this other guy, his whole thing is to basically do what Joel Salatin does. And Joel Salatin, don't get me wrong, Joel Salatin is a genius. He's a brilliant, brilliant man. And I use Salatin's techniques for years to raise chickens and sell them. The thing is that I was selling chickens for just a little bit more than what I was paying for feed.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's not a really great business model, but I had all these ideas on how I could improve it. Granted, I'm going to improve the model, but the one thing is like, what would really improve it is if I didn't have to pay for feed. Of course, the first thought is like, well, let's grow it. Yeah, but boy, it sure is a lot of work to harvest that, and I'm lazy. Now what do you do? And so then I got this idea. I know, I'll grow it, and I'll have the chickens harvest it. Yeah. Now the chickens do all the work. Now I don't know if you've ever have you ever raised chickens at all?
Yeah, we have a flock of about, well, it's city flock, so there are only about 15.
Okay. Have you ever raised those Cornish rock cross chickens?
No, we've done Orpingtons, Australorps, Americanas, and questionable Aracanas.
Okay. All right. So dominantly egg breeds or dual breeds.
Yeah.
So these Cornish rock cross, they're a meat breed, and they're ready to harvest in like 8 or 9 weeks. And so they've got a great feed to meat conversion ratio. But there's a couple of weird things. So the first time I ever raised Cornish rock cross, they get to this certain age at about 6 weeks where they look like some sort of Franken chicken. They've like grown so fast that the feathers couldn't keep up, so they look like they're already like 3/4 plucked. And then a bug will land in front of them and they won't chase it. They'll just lay there. And all they want to do is hang their head in the feeder and eat, and then hang their feet over in the water stuff and drink. And it's like, this is all they really want to do. So it's and so the first time I'm raising them, it's like, these chickens are horrible. This is some sort of crazy ass mutation, and I'm never raising them again. So then harvest day comes, and then we cook one up and I eat it, and it's like, this is so delicious. I can't raise anything but these for the rest of my life. So dilemma. All right, but the key is that to get them to go out and harvest has its challenges. But the thing is with a paddock shift system, then instead of having them in these Salatin style pens that you move around, and you'll move them like twice a day, which by the way, I'm lazy, you know, and so that's like work. And so with these pens, with these, with the paddock shifts, you have this paddock, they'll be on like half an acre. And it's like, yeah, you leave them there for 3 days, no problem. And then you just, when you want to move them, you just go to the gate between the current paddock and the next paddock, and you just open the gate, and they all run through, and then you close the gate. It's like so easy. What a cakewalk. And then in these areas, you plant mountains of chicken food, all different kinds of stuff. But one of the things is that a chicken, genus Gallus, this is a jungle animal. It comes from the jungle. So in these Salatin style pens, they move them across pastures. There's no brush or trees. And so I was kind of feeling like, man, in the pens, there's just something wrong. How can I do the pens but somehow get some brush inside the pens? So I was designing all these new systems to try and make it so that it'll be brush compatible with these pens. And that's where I kind of got to thinking like, oh, you know what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make the pens, a 1/4 acre or half acre size, like big, instead of these things that I have to move twice a day.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then inside I can grow trees, full size trees. I mean, one of the best things for chickens to eat is mulberries, because a good mulberry tree will produce just mountains of chicken food.
I didn't realize that chickens because like mulberry trees grow like crazy here. I didn't realize that was a big thing for chickens.
Yeah, yummers. And in fact, there are a lot of farmers where they're raising a lot of different fruit, and then birds come in and wipe out their crop.
Mm.
But if you just plant a couple mulberries, it's like the birds prefer the mulberries over almost anything else.
Huh.
So anyway, all right. The bottom line is that in my article, I advocate paddock shift. And this other guy, he advocates the Salatin pins. That's it. That's all there is to it.
Okay.
I just trying to be lazier. And I'm in my article. I mean, it's my article. I advocate paddock shift, and I've got a lot of reasons for it. I got a lot of things. And I talk about Salatin's good in these cases, and it's like it's not terrible. I mean, Salatin style pens are better than, factory raised, or it's even better than coop and run in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
So it's got its ups and its downs.
Okay.
But I believe that the paddock shift systems have the potential to be far superior if you do it right.
Well, that's always the key, isn't it? Doing it right.
Doing it right, but it's like I think that the best you can do with the Salatin style pins is going to be equal to doing a really lousy job with paddock shift.
Oh, see, that's impressive. So are y'all, how are y'all judging this? Or how are you judging this?
In my article, I have, I believe it's 8 different factors. So for example, there's 2 of the factors are poop.
Mm-hmm.
So one aspect of poop is how much poop do I have to deal with? Because I don't like to deal with it. I don't like to have anything to do with it. I'm not a fan of like, it'd be great is to rub my hands around and poop.
Yeah,
just
especially chicken
not
poop.
Into that. Yeah, and I don't want to smell it either. Ugh. Oh. So there's that. The other angle of poop is like how much time do the chickens have to spend standing around in it?
Mm-hmm.
I don't like the idea of chickens standing around in their own poop. I'm against that. Like with the Salatin style pins, then it's like, okay, you're inside this pen and there's like 25 other birds in there with you. It's not a big space and you're there for 12 hours. You're going to be standing around in some poop.
Mm-hmm.
Your feet are going to get poopy, but if you're in a paddock that's a half an acre in size, then it just doesn't seem to rack up poop as quickly. You've got more space. I don't know if it decomposes faster or, the soil's more active. I have no idea. But, it's just more space. And that's probably a big part of it. So, and then plus, if you want to do it better, maybe you'll put even fewer birds in or make the paddocks even larger. And then in which case there's even less. But the pens, the Salatin style pens, if you make them bigger, you've got to move the bigger pen. And, do you really have the ability to move a bigger pen?
Yeah.
So you can't make them too much bigger, or you can move them far more often. So that way, the poop factor gets better. So it's like the standing around and the having to deal with poop is like there's really no issue in either system. You're not dealing with poop. You're not shoveling it in any way. But with the Salatin style pen system, chickens are standing in poop more than they are in the paddock shift system. So but it's not that much more. It's a factor. I think a big one is that in the paddock shift system, then you're definitely in a more natural environment, closer to the chicken's natural environment. There will be trees and brush, and that's important to me. I think it's not important to Jack, but it's important to me.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of that, trees can be like mulberries, and the brush could also be food-producing brush. Or insect attracting brush, so that way there's more bugs for the chickens to eat. I think in the pens, that's a good one. Bugs in the Salatin style pens, I think they're going to wipe out all the bugs in the first 5 minutes, and then it's just up to waiting to see if another bug might pop in from the sides. But I think that in the paddock shift systems, there's going to be a lot more bugs to eat. That's so when it comes to the bug factor, I think that the bugs are going to be better. Now in this weird duel, the guy kept going on about chicken tractors, and it's like I don't think he knew the difference between a chicken tractor and a Salatin style pen. I think he used them interchangeably, but a chicken tractor is a much smaller thing, typically used in more urban environments.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be typically 3 feet by 7 feet, and you'll keep 3 to 7 chickens in it. Then there's chicken tractor, the contraption, and this is because I discern between the two. It's very important to me, because then there's chicken tractor, the contraption, the 3 foot by 7 foot thing. It's 3 feet are dedicated to being like a little shelter, and the rest of it's kind of chicken wire or something, so they can go out and get some sun, kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
But now that's the contraption. Then there's the philosophy, and the philosophy is something where it's you leave the chickens in one spot until every last bit of green is gone, and then you move them to the next spot. So then the philosophy is that, oh, look, there used to be a bunch of weeds here, but we left the chicken tractor there until all the weeds were gone. Now there's no more weeds. And on top of that, there's a lovely thick layer of fertilizer. Isn't that amazing? And so they're like, it's a feature, but it freaks me out, man. I don't like it, because that means they're standing around in a lot of their own poop. And I'm not, but even worse than that. The chicken's going to be in that area, and the first thing the chicken's going to do is okay, I got a choice between eating the growies that are growing here, which, by the way, are getting pooped on quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So I got all the growies to eat, or I can have that moldy Purina chicken chow, that dried up, moldy, now with ground up minerals, which is disgusting, but it is still technically food. Which is it going to be? Well, when you first get there, things aren't pooped on too much, and there are some things that are delicious. They love to go right for the dandelions. Oh, man, dandelions are good. So they eat the dandelions, and then they eat a little of this and a little of that, and then now they've eaten all the ice cream. All the ice cream's gone, and everything's getting kind of poopy. The plants that are left are, the stuff that they start eating after that are mildly toxic. If the chicken had a lot of other options, the chicken wouldn't eat it.
Mm-hmm.
But because the chicken doesn't have a lot of other options, the chicken eats it. And then, so now the chicken's consumed 90% of all the vegetation in this space. The 10% that's left has a lot of poop on it. And on top of that last 10% is actually pretty toxic. But it's you've got nothing else. You've got moldy Purina chicken chow and toxic growies covered in poop. And so now this is the part that really bothers me. The chicken isn't allowed to move until the chicken eats every last bit of those toxic growies covered in poop.
Yeah, at that point, it doesn't sound that much better than a factory chicken. I mean, there's a pretty big difference there. But I'm exaggerating. But at that point, it doesn't. Yeah, what you're laying out doesn't seem that great.
Well, so see, that's where I got the factors. So I've got 8 different factors that I judge this by. So in this particular factor, I actually score it worse. For vegetation, I score it worse than factory, because in factory you don't get any vegetation.
Mm.
So I'll score it worse. But on the other hand, for getting sun, oh yeah, you get a much higher score with the chicken tractor. So it's the chicken tractor that bothers me. I don't care for the chicken tractor, and then I can see how Jack is going to side with this other guy, because to Jack it's just a chicken, So, but to me it's I feel like I have a responsibility to be a better caretaker of this animal. I don't know. I just feel it through and through that I don't want to live somewhere where the chickens are treated poorly. I want to live somewhere where the chickens are treated really good.
Mm-hmm.
It's important to me. Now, granted, at the same time, I want to make a profit, and I want to make a bigger profit than that other guy. And I want my profit to be amazing and awesome and spectacular, and I want to win all the prizes for profit making.
Mm.
And, of course, the number one prize you get is the profit itself.
Mm-hmm.
But still, it's I want to play the game. I'm playing the game, and I want to do a good job. But yeah, I just can't bear the thought of, because to me if I were to do that, and I did do that. I mean, I didn't do the scorched earth thing. That's what I refer to this as, scorched earth.
Mm-hmm.
But I did do the South and style pins. I did that for several years, and I did make a profit, and I could have increased my profit, but And instead, I like shifting gears. So, moving on to a system. And then I moved away from that farm and never got a chance to really profit from that system. But I've got new land now, new fresh start. We'll do this again.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to it. Now, how do people keep up with you? You've got your podcast, you've got your website. What are the best ways to get in touch with Paul Wheaton?
The easiest one is to go to permies.com. And that's like, we've kind of set that up to be a big jumping off point for everything else. But most people go to the forums, and I gotta warn your listeners, if you go out there and you get started, you might want to say goodbye to your family. I've had a lot of people complain that they got hooked and now they never found out how Breaking Bad ended. So it's a very different thing. It's a very different way of, we've got very strict rules about how people communicate, because we've got some people that show up and they're nasty and we get rid of them. Mm-hmm. So I feel very passionately that I needed a place where the humble folk could come and share their thoughts. But we also talk about some very odd ways of doing it. But there's a lot of stuff about urban, but I'd have to say the whole site does have a pretty powerful focus on having more land. Mm-hmm. And I think that a lot of our urban folks dream of someday having more land. Mm-hmm. But we have at least one forum dedicated to urban. And there's a lot of discussion there. I'd say about a third of the discussion there is by people that are currently doing urban.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So the things that we talk about, did you see that keynote thing on that I did that's on YouTube?
No, I did not.
So that's 2.5 hours long of me standing in front of 200 people talking about, I think we called it 72 bricks. Mm-hmm. And so this is 72 different things in permaculture. So it's like just to kind of give you a sample of how nutty these things are and how different they are. Now, you mentioned the podcasts. I got to tell you that podcasts aren't for everybody. We use the full beauty of the English language, and some people have been trained to fear words. So they would fear these podcasts.
Yeah.
But I think there's like 270 of them. We cover a lot of different topics. I would be really sure that at least half the stuff we cover, your listeners have never heard of before. And it's like when you hear it, it's kind of like just a real quick, like there's a big click, like, well, that makes perfect sense. Like the whole rocket mass heater thing. I mean, if you think about it, when you have a conventional fireplace or a conventional wood stove, let's go with a conventional wood stove. In order for the chimney feature to work, in order to get the smoke out of the house, it has to take it out at 300 to 600 degrees out the roof. Mm. And it's like, that's pretty warm. Don't you want that in your house, all that warm stuff in the house? I mean, yeah, you don't want the smoke, but all that warmitude. And basically that's what we're doing. We're keeping all the warm stuff in the house. Now that I've said that, I mean, doesn't that seem like obvious?
Oh, yeah, it's a lot better, a lot more efficient than a traditional fireplace by far.
And I'll bet you for 90% of your listeners, this is the first they've ever heard of this. And now they're thinking like, well, yeah, I don't want to shoot all the heat out the roof. I want it in my house. Mm-hmm. And then at the same time, it's like you start saying, well, you heat your home with 1/10 the wood. And it's like, yeah, I know about going and getting in my truck and going out and getting, all these cords of wood. And I'm kind of tired of that. I don't like doing that. And then, of course, then there's all the chopping. And it's like, rather than chopping, I could be, doing entertaining things and stuff. I think, and that's just one thing. That's just, I bet you we have at least 1,000. At least 1,000 different things that are like things that your listeners have never heard of before, and they'll find it to be profound. And then the thing that you talked about earlier, the jump drive. This is something where they just arrived the other day. We had a bunch of listeners where they're living rurally and they don't have very good internet, and they kept asking to get all the podcasts and videos in a way that they don't need the internet because they. So we got this jump drive. It looks like a little jar with a little cork in the top of it, but it's a jump drive. So we've been selling them on Permies. I don't know if anybody really wants that, but because everything that's on it we've given away for free. It's just that podcasts are big and videos are big, and so if you've got dial-up, then yeah, it's kind of challenging.
Yeah.
And so then this is a handy thing, I guess. So yeah, we've got the rocket mass heater DVDs, which are just a workshop. We've got the playing cards, which I think are really nice. That's a really nice thing. And the jump drive. And then here in a couple of months, we'll have this new World Domination Gardening DVD set. That's the Kickstarter that we've got going on right now. But by the time your listeners hear this, it'll probably be over.
They'll have already missed it. But is it something you're thinking about maybe releasing again later, like the Rocket Mass stuff?
Yeah. We're going to do it this time. When we did the Rocket Mass Heater Kickstarter, we weren't sure if we would release it later. And so, but there was so much demand that we did, and now I kind of know how to do that. Whereas back then it was like, I don't want to learn how to do this.
Yeah.
But it's like I had hundreds of people after the Kickstarter saying, I missed out and I need this. and it's like, well, I like collecting money. So all right, we'll do this. So the only thing that's weird is that I feel like to respect the people that supported my Kickstarter, I have to sell it for more than what I sold it for in the Kickstarter. So we're doing that. We're selling it. It costs more. It costs $105 out at Amazon. And then, when you go and if you sign up for my daily-ish email, then we tell you when the next Kickstarter is, and then we'll resell the DVDs for a lot cheaper during the Kickstarter. But you got to suffer through an email every day from me.
Well, awesome. Well, Paul, I sure appreciate you coming on, and I hope we'll have to do this again sometime soon.
Sure thing, Aaron. I love infecting brains with my crazy thoughts.
Awesome, dude. Thanks. Help us bring you better information about preparedness. If you have an author, blogger, podcaster, video blogger, or any other person you'd like to hear on the show, we'd love to have them on. Contact the person you'd like to hear on the show and tell them about In the Rabbit Hole Urban Survival Podcast. Tell them to visit intherabbithole.com/guest. Don't wait. Do it today, and let's grow the show together. From the Lone Star State, till next time, stay safe and sound.